Hey guys, today's video is all about the basics of SQL. And this video is going to be exclusively on SQL code, so we're not going to get into downloading any databases, downloading any software, because I just want to show you what SQL code looks like and give you a chance to practice before I bore you with the details of downloading softwares. Since we're not downloading any software, we're just going to be using a free online SQL compiler. I've linked the website in the description so that you can follow along with this video. Alright, so first things first, just to familiarize you with this platform a little bit, I have three tables over here called customers, orders, and shippings. And within each table, I have a list of different columns. So in customers, I have the columns customer ID, first name, last name, age, and country. And next to each column is the data type of the column. All right, so if you've never written SQL code before and you have no idea what SQL is, the easiest way that I can explain it is that it's essentially a coding language that you use to query data from a database. So all of our data is stored in one or more databases, and we can write code to get the data that we need for analysis. It's also pretty easy to learn because SQL code is written a lot like spoken English. So here's a really simple example. I'm selecting all of the columns from the table called orders. Most of your SQL queries are going to start with the command select. After you type out select, you're going to indicate which columns in the table you want to view. If you want to view all of the columns in the table, then you'll just use an asterisk. Next, you're going to use the from command to indicate which table you're selecting your data from. And in this case, I'm using the table called orders. And you should always end your query with a semicolon. Now let's say that I just want to look at the order ID and the amount. So instead of selecting all, I'm going to indicate which columns that I want to select. So I want to select order ID and amount. Make sure that you're separating each column with a comma. Then I'll just click run, and there we go. I get the data that I queried. If I wanted to look at, let's say, customer ID, but I wanted to look at just the distinct customer IDs, meaning I don't want to see any repeats of customer ID. Well, I'm going to use distinct. And then when I run my code, I just get a list of distinct customer IDs. Let's pause for a second and talk about SQL best practices. A lot of times you'll see commands in all caps. So you might see select in all caps. You might see from in all caps. And the query works just the same. You can choose whichever method works best for you. Personally, I don't like my code to be in all caps. I just think it takes a little bit longer, so I'm fine with my code being in lowercase. Another recommendation is to start a new line for each column that you're selecting. You should also indent each column name. This makes it much easier to see exactly how many columns you're querying. All right, moving on. So I have the data that I need, and let's say that I want to filter it. So I only want to see the orders where the amount is greater than 400. To filter your data, you're going to use where. And now I'm just going to type in the criteria that I want to filter by. So I want the column amount to be greater than 400. Now I'll run my query. And there we go. I get the one data point where the amount is greater than 400. If I want it to be inclusive of 400, so I want to select all of the data where the amount is greater than or equal to 400, then I'll just include an equal sign after my greater than sign. And I run my SQL query, and now I get all of the amounts that are greater than or equal to 400. If I wanted to filter by item, so let's say I just wanted to look at my data where the item is keyboard, then I'm going to type in where the name of my column, item, is equal to, and in quotation marks, keyboard. And I run my query, and there we go. Now my data is filtered by just keyboard. It's really important that when you're indicating the data that you want to filter by, remember that this is case sensitive. So if I were to type in keyboard with a lowercase k and run my SQL query, the result set is empty. I don't get any data because there are no items with keyboard typed out with a lowercase k. Instead of using equals, you can also use in. And if you use in, you will also need to add parentheses around your keyword. In is a little bit different. Let's say that in my database, I had different types of keyboards. So I had a white keyboard, I have a green keyboard, I have a black keyboard, and I just want to find all of the keyboards. You could then use in to ensure that you're filtering by all of the different items that contain the word keyboard. All right, really quickly, I'm going to comment out this where command so I can look at all of my data. And let's say that I want to filter by all of the items that include mouse. So to do that, we're going to use like. So I'm going to say where and the column that I want to filter by, item, like, and in quotation marks, I'm going to say mouse. And then I need to add a percentage. And what that's going to do is it's going to filter by all of the items that include mouse. So that's mouse and mouse pad. Let's make sure that it works. And just as predicted, we get all of the items that include mouse. Now let's say that I want to look at all of my data where the amount is between 300 and 400. So remember I said that SQL is written just like spoken English. This is my favorite example. So we're looking for all of the data where the amount is between 300 and 400. And then when I run my query, I get all of the data where the amount is between 300 and 400 and it's inclusive. So it's greater than or equal to 300 and less than or equal to 400. If I want to temporarily exclude part of my code, I can just use 2 dashes and that comments out this portion of code. So it's as if it's not there. This is good practice if you're frequently editing your code. That way you don't have to keep deleting and rewriting portions of your code. If I wanted to add this back into my code, I would just remove the 2 dashes. But let's comment that out for now. And let's select all of our data. So now I have all of the data in my table called orders. And let's say that I want it ordered by amount in ascending order. So I'm going to use order by. Order by comes after where. And even though I have where commented out, I'm still going to write my SQL code in the correct order. So now I'm just going to specify which column that I want to order by, and I'll run my code. And there we go. My data is sorted by amount in ascending order. Order by automatically orders your data in ascending order, but you could specify ASC if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. If you wanted to sort in descending order, then you'll just specify DESC. And when I run that, I get my data sorted in descending order by amount. You can also order by more than one column. So let's say I want to order first by amount and next by customer ID. And let's say I want it ordered in ascending order. All you have to do is type in the first column that you want to order by, followed by the second column that you want to order by. If you have more than 2 columns that you want to order by, then you'll just continue adding them in order. All right, let's run this and see what happens. There we go. My data is ordered first by amount and second by customer ID. So what that means is my data is ordered first by amount, and then if there are 2 of the same amounts, then the data is ordered by customer ID. So number 1 comes first, followed by number 4. But what if I wanted to order first by amount in ascending order, and secondly by customer ID in descending order? Well, I would just specify after the column that I want ordered in descending order, that I want it ordered in descending order. And because DES is only after customer ID, it's only going to be applied to customer ID. Let's run it and make sure that it works. And just as predicted, my data is ordered first by amount in ascending order and second by customer ID in descending order. So this is really important. If I wanted both of my columns ordered in descending order, then I have to type DES after both of my columns. I can't just type it at the end because it will only be applied to the last column. All right, so we have just gone through a lot of information, and I want to give you a chance to practice some of what you've just learned. So let's do a really quick practice example. Select the columns order ID, item, amount, and customer ID, and only include amounts greater than or equal to 300 and sort by customer ID in descending order. So I want you to pause the video, try this on your own, and when you think you have it, come back and unpause the video. All right, so I'm gonna assume that you've paused the video, you've tried this on your own, and you're back to see if you got the right answer. So let's start with the columns that we need to select. And remembering SQL best practices, we're gonna start a new line in indent. So we're selecting the columns order ID, comma, new line, item, comma, new line, amount, comma, new line, and customer ID. We don't need a comma after the last column that we're selecting. From is going to be the table that we are selecting our data from, which is still orders. Now we're going to filter our data. So we only want to include amounts greater than or equal to 300. So I'm going to use where. So we want amounts greater than or equal to 300. And lastly, we need to sort by customer ID in descending order, which means that we're going to use order by. We're sorting by customer ID in descending order. And when I run my SQL query, and if you got this output, then congratulations, you're ready to proceed with the rest of the video. All right, let's move on to operators. Operators allow you to filter by more than one condition. So for example, if I wanted to look at just data where the item is a keyboard and the customer ID is 1, I could use the operator AND. So I'm going to start a new line here and I'm going to indent. And I'm going to type in my first condition, which is item equals keyboard. And then I'll start a new line and use the operator and type in my second condition, which is customer ID equals 1. And when I run my code, I get only the data where the item is keyboard and the customer ID is 1. Let's talk about SQL best practices again. A lot of times when you have more than one condition, you'll see 1 equals 1 after where. There's a good reason for that, and you should always include the condition 1 equals 1, especially when you have more than one condition. The condition 1 equals 1 is always true, so it doesn't filter the data any more than if it weren't there. But now that we have this initial condition, we have to add and in front of our second condition. And this makes our code look much more clean. It's also much easier to edit. If I don't have this condition 1 equals 1 and I just start with my first condition, it still works, but it's more difficult to edit. So if I wanted to remove this condition and I forgot to remove the and operator, then when I run my SQL code, there's a syntax error, so then I have to edit even more, and then I run my code again, and then it works. Whereas if I just start with the condition 1 equals 1, then if I wanted to remove one of my conditions, I could easily just delete it and run my query, and it works just fine. Another operator that you can use to filter your data is OR. So for example, if I wanted to filter by items that are either a monitor or a keyboard, I could use OR. So I'm gonna say where item equals keyboard or item equals monitor. And when I run my SQL code, I get all of my data where the item is either a keyboard or a monitor. OR is frequently confused with AND. OR displays a record if any of the conditions are met, and displays a record if all of the conditions are met. The last operator that we're going to talk about is NOT. You can use NOT to exclude any criteria from your data. So for example, if I want to select all of my data except mousepad items, then I'm going to say where NOT item equals mousepad. And then when I run my code, I get all of my data except when the item equals mousepad. Lastly, let's go through aggregate functions. So if you've ever used aggregate functions in Excel, like if you're looking for the average of a column or the maximum of a column, it's going to look very similar in SQL. So for example, if I wanted to select the maximum amount from this table, then I would just select max and in parentheses, the name of the column, amount. And then when I run my code, I'm just given the maximum amount. I could do the same thing with the minimum amount or the average amount or the sum of amount. This is the sum of the entire column amount. So operators are great for aggregating your data. And if you don't like this column name here, sum amount, you can use as to name this column name something different. So I'm just gonna call it total amount. And then when I run my code, I get a much clearer column name. All right, let's move on to group by. And we're looking at a different table now. So I've selected all of my data from the table called customers. So let's say that I want to find the average age of customers within each country. So for example, I want to find the average age of customers in the USA, the average age of customers in the UK, and the average age of customers in the UAE. The best way to do that is using group by. All right, so which fields do I need to select? Well, I need to select the age and the country, but I'm gonna be intentional about selecting the country first because I'm grouping by country, and so I want the country field to be the leftmost column in my data. I also want the average age, which I'm going to alias as average age. We're selecting data from the table customers, and now we get to use group by. So like I said, we're grouping our data by country because we want to see the average age by country, which means that we're just going to group by country. And now I'll run my code, and there we go. I get the average age by country. Here's a quick little SQL hack for group by. Instead of typing out the field name that you want to group by, you could instead just use the position of this field within your select statement. So for example, country is the first field in the select statement, so I could instead type 1, And when I run my code, I get the same answer. All right, now let's go through a basic inner join. So joins in SQL are kind of like a VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP in Excel. You can use a join to bring together two tables along a common column. So for example, my tables customers and orders both share the column customer ID, which means that we can join these two tables along the column customer ID. The common column that we want to join the two tables along does not have to be named the same thing. So in this case, the tables customers and orders share the column customer ID, and they're both named customer ID. But we could still join these two tables along this column, even if one of them was not named customer ID. So let's get into how to actually do the inner join. So this is the simple outline that I like to use whenever I do an inner join. Let me show you how it works. We're going to start by selecting the columns that we need. The first column that we need is from table 2, and we could assign either of these tables to be table 1 and table 2, but I'm just going to say that orders is my table 2. So again, we're selecting table 2, which is orders, dot common column, or the column that the two tables share, which we already said was customer ID. Next, I'm going to pull any other columns that I need from table 2. So let's just say that I also want to pull the item column from table 2. So again, I'm going to start with the name of table 2, which is orders, dot the name of the other columns that we want to pull, which in this case is just item. Now, if I wanted to pull any other columns from table 2, I would just repeat this step. But I don't need any other columns from my orders table, so I'm going to move on to the next column. And the next column that I'm going to pull is from table 1, which we said was customers. So I'm going to say customers dot any column that I need from table 1. And let's just say that I want to pull the first name and the last name from the customers table. So I'm going to start with the first name, and I'll just do the same thing for the last name. All right, those are all of the columns that I'm going to pull. So now I'm going to move on to from. Coming back to my outline, I'm going to pull from table 1, which again we said was customers. And now we can move on to join. And this is where we are going to join the second table. And we said that our table 2 is orders. So again, you can choose whichever table you want to be, table 1 and table 2. So instead I could do from orders and join customers, whatever is easiest for you to remember. And now we're going to move on to our last line in the join, which is on. This is where we're going to identify which column is the common column, or the column that the two tables share. So I'm going to start with table 1, which is customers, dot the common column, which again is customer ID. And I'm going to set it equal to table 2, which is orders, dot the common column, or the name of the column that the two tables share from table 2, which is also named customer ID. So that's it. That's my inner join. And now I'm just going to comment out my outline so that I can run my SQL code. So let's run my code and make sure that it works. And there we go. We get the columns that we pulled from each table joined along the column customer ID. So now that you know how to do an inner join, let's go through a really quick practice problem. The practice problem is to pull the order ID, amount, customer ID, and shipping status. I'll give you a little bit of help here and tell you that you're going to be pulling this data from the two tables, orders and shippings. And I'm also going to tell you that this customer column is the exact same as the customer ID. So go ahead and pause the video, try this problem on your own, and come back to this video after you've found the solution. All right, welcome back. I hope you actually paused the video, you tried the problem on your own, and you're here to make sure that you got the right answer. So again, we're pulling the order ID, the amount, the customer ID, and the shipping status. So the order ID is in the orders table, the amount is also in the orders table, and the customer ID is in both orders and shippings. The shipping status is in the shippings table. So to pull all of this data, we need to do an inner join. I'm going to use my outline for this problem. This just makes it so much easier to know that I'm writing the correct code to get the data that I need. So again, I'm going to start with the select command. And now we need to assign a table 1 and a table 2. I'm just going to make it easy and say that orders is my table 1 and shippings is my table 2. So from table 2, I need the common column. My table 2 is shippings. And my common column, or the column that the two tables share, is customer. So I'm going to type out customer, And moving on to any other columns that I need to pull from my table 2. And we know that we need to pull the shipping status. So again, I'm going to type out table 2, shippings, dot the name of my field, status. Next, I'm going to pull from table 1, which is any other columns that we need from table 1. We don't need to pull the column customer ID because we already pulled customer from the shippings table. So we're just going to pull our other columns that we need from the orders table. So starting with the name of table 1, which is orders, I'm going to need the order ID, and also from my table 1 called orders, I'm going to need the amount. And that's it. Those are the 4 fields that I need from my 2 tables. Now I can move on to from. So I'm going to pull data from table 1, which is orders, and I'm going to join it to my table 2, which is shippings. And lastly, I'm going to indicate the common column that the 2 tables share. So I'm going to say on table 1, which again is orders, dot the common column. And in table 1, my common column is named customer ID. And I'm going to set that equal to the name of my table 2, which is shippings, dot the name of my common column in table 2. In table 2, the name of my column is customer, not customer ID. So I'm just going to type out customer. All right, now I'm going to comment out my outline so that I can run my query. And let's run my code and make sure that I get the right answer. And there we go. We get the order ID right here. We get the amount right here. We pulled the customer ID, which is called customer, and we pulled the shipping status, called status. We've successfully joined the 2 tables, orders and shippings, along the common column customer ID. There are a lot of other different types of joins, and there's a lot more that you can do within SQL, but this concludes my beginner SQL tutorial video. So if this video was helpful to you, make sure to give me a like and comment what you want to see in my next SQL video. And make sure to subscribe to get notified every time that I post. Thanks for watching.